Hey guys, this is Pineapple and welcome to the first Mob Psycho video. I'm still figuring out how these videos are gonna look, but this is definitely a cool vibe that we've got going on here, right? I mean, the dark background, the little neon lighting, I think we're gonna have a good time. Today we're talking about Mob Psycho 100 Season 1, and we're gonna be explaining a number of characters that are featured in that season that'll probably have a role to play in Season 2. Season 2 of the show starts on January 7th, I believe, so if you haven't seen the series, you should definitely check it out before watching this video. I'll also have a video about what you can expect from Season 2 of the series dropping, I believe, on Wednesday, so make sure you're either following me on Twitter at VocalPineapple or you've clicked the bell icon to get those notifications because we're coming in hot with the Mob Psycho content. I've got a dope new intro being prepared by the amazing editor that did my first one, but for now, we're gonna stick with that OG intro and get right into the info. Hit it! So for those of you that didn't catch my Twitch stream the other day, basically I streamed during the last day of Jump Festa and played some music and hung out with whoever showed up. We had a really good time, but one of the things that came with it was a potential new way for me to edit my videos, and I'm actually a big fan of this new method since it honestly makes it way easier on me and makes it so I can get videos done faster. The added bonus is that I can freely move around the popsicle figures now, but at the same time, I guess the takeaway is that things aren't going to look as organized as they were before, and I really can't control two popsicle figures at once, so there are ups and downs. I'm sure that I can work this into how I usually edit my videos to come up with some perfect marriage of the two, but for this video, I'm going to be trying out my new editing approach, and you guys can let me know if you enjoyed it. At the very least, this should make those manga reviews more interesting because the pineapple will actually be moving around according to my talking. Enough with that though. Mob Psycho 100. Who are the characters you should know about and what's the story so far? Well, in Season 1 of Mob Psycho 100, we're introduced to Reigen Arataka. Reigen is a powerful psychic that runs an agency that allows people to come in and pay a certain price to have Reigen rid them of their evil spirits or their general discomforts. The problem here is that Reigen is a fraud. He's actually just a normal person, and this whole operation is kind of a scam. People come in with back pain or relationship problems, and Reigen is quick to tell them that the problems are related to ghosts and that he can help them if they pay for his fairly priced plans, or they can go with the most expensive options to get rid of the ghost permanently. Most people seem to either be fairly skeptical of Reigen or rather accepting, but what keeps this operation going is Reigen's pupil, but we'll talk about him in a moment. Reigen is a pretty dependable guy, even though he presents himself as this uncaring, shady adult. He genuinely cares about Mob, his pupil, even though he's a rather selfish guy in some regards. Caring about Mob doesn't keep him from manipulating Mob into doing what Reigen wants from time to time, but at the same time, his selfishness doesn't stop him from stepping in when he thinks Mob needs help or needs some sort of adult guidance. This is probably because for all of his tricks and gags, Mob actually looks up to Reigen as his psychic master. He takes Reigen's words to heart and he applies them into his life, and even though Reigen is a fraud, he feels the weight of this relationship with Mob, and that's what keeps him fairly centered as a character. At the beginning of the series, Reigen is scamming some people that are being haunted, and when he realizes that they're actually being haunted and a spirit needs to get dealt with, he calls in Mob, and his real name is Shigeo Kageyama. Mob is a short, out-of-shape, dark-haired kid without any real striking features. He looks very plain, and many fans will be quick to notice that he sorta just looks like Saitama with a bowl cut, if Saitama was also a middle schooler. Mob comes in and wipes the spirit away in seconds, and this is because unlike his teacher, Mob is a powerful Esper, and he has real psychic powers. It isn't clear how strong Mob is, but that's the whole point. The whole series is at least partially about finding out what sort of hidden power Mob has. Mob isn't the most mentally stable child. He's prone to outbursts of all sorts of different emotions, and he tries to keep his emotions completely muted because he knows that he can't control his powers when he gets too emotional. This is presented as a countdown from 0 to 100 that shows the percentage of how close we are to Mob being overwhelmed by his emotions again and doing something wild of his powers. These numbers count up to Mob's next explosion at 100%, and you don't want to be around this guy when he gets serious. He's done some pretty amazing things in Season 1 alone. We see him completely dominate pretty much anyone that comes his way once he enters his 100% form. He leaves other Espers in shock and awe as he does things that shouldn't even be possible for an Esper to do. He can take apart entire buildings and put them back together piece by piece. He can cover his body in a ridiculously tough psychic armor that protects him from all attacks, and he pretty much just toys with people without letting them be able to do pretty much anything back. But luckily for everyone, Mob is a good kid who honestly isn't that interested in using his powers. He's sort of locked all those desires and emotions deep inside of him, and he's not like the other espers in the series who seek to strengthen their powers or prove that they're the best. There's one occasion where Mob will get into his bag, and that's when his counter goes from 100% to unknown percent. This percentage is shown to us as 3 corrupt question marks, and if you see this, it usually means that Mob has gone completely out of control and his emotions are not only spilling out, but they're amplified and running wild. In his unknown form, Mob is pretty much a psychic Saitama. He just ragdolls his enemies, and he's relentless. He doesn't care if he has to have a giant DBZ scale battle with you and destroy buildings, leaving you a smoking pile of ash on the floor. This is Mob at his most dangerous, and even his appearance is terrifying in this form. His body gets covered in a weird energy, and his physical form changes, and the art style makes him look like some sort of wild spirit in the shape of a boy. In Season 1, Mob gets into a number of situations, but none more serious than the one featuring his brother, Ritsu Kageyama, but we'll get into that in a little bit. Mob is friends with a small spirit named Dimple, and I want to talk about him real quick before we get any further. Dimple is a spirit that was once Mob's enemy, but in Season 1 we get to see him get taken down, and he becomes a sort of pet for Mob. He realizes how strong Mob is, and he's fairly wise, even though he's a little bit of a slimeball as well. Dimple follows Mob around pretty often, and he's more or less his closest friend because the two are always together. Mob doesn't really show his emotions, so it's hard to see these two as being close, but if something happens to Dimple, like that time that it seemed like he got erased right before Mob's eyes, Mob's reaction shows us how he really feels. Dimple is able to possess people, and when he does, they get 2 little Pikachu-like blush spots on their face just like Dimple has. When he's possessing people, I believe they get a certain level of psychic power, probably roughly equal to or a bit more than what Dimple would have himself as a spirit. Dimple has actually taken on some fairly high-level demons and monsters, so while he's small and he's obviously meant to serve as some kind of comic relief, he's also fairly formidable, and at the very least, he's fun to have around. He is there when Mob fights another Esper that we should get to know, Teruki Hanazawa. Teruki goes to another school, but gets involved with Mob when Mob is in the middle of some conflict between thugs. Teruki easily beats all of the thugs up with the help of his powers, and Mob, keeping Reagan's teachings about not using your powers against people weaker than you in mind, tells Teruki to stop using his powers against normal people. Teruki has a superiority complex and tells Mob that he's better than people, so he should be able to do what he wants. He then starts attacking Mob to test Mob's powers out. This doesn't go too well for him, and eventually he joins the main party of the group. He becomes Mob's friend, and he's a fairly powerful ally with more than enough power to hold his own against most of the threats that we find in Season 1. The threat revolves around Claw, an evil organization of espers that exists in the Mob Psycho world, but more on them in a second. Mob's younger brother Ritsu Kageyama is a pretty interesting character. He starts off as Mob's supportive younger brother, but he really seems like more of an older brother character. He watches out for Mob, he's taller than Mob, and he overall seems to have more responsibilities than Mob as well. He's part of the disciplinary group at his school, and he's a great older brother, but Ritsu has some pretty repressed emotions of his own. You see, Ritsu doesn't have any psychic powers of his own, so he's fairly jealous of his little brother Mob. He wants to have powers of his own so he can compare to his brother, and this stems from several things. This comes from seeing his brother's powers in action himself and being terrified of what Mob can do, but also being interested in what Ritsu himself can do with the powers if he was able to control them. Ritsu goes to a research lab, and over time, his powers do actually awaken within his body, and he's actually also a fairly powerful psychic. You could even make the argument that he's comparable to Mob, but we're probably going to have to wait until Season 2 to see what he can actually do. These are the main characters that you should know about from the first season, because knowing them pretty much lets you know all of the main plot points from Season 1, but there are also a number of other characters that make an appearance in Season 1, and the show does have a pretty strong supporting cast. These characters are involved in Mob's life in a number of ways, whether it's the leader of the personal fitness club that Mob joined in order to train his body physically, which is something that he's absolutely terrible at, or it's the leader of the occult club, a group that's into ghosts and psychic powers that Mob kind of joins, really just because he was more or less forced to. He's forced into this sort of strange relationship with the leader of the group and his other classmates, and Mob actually has a cult of people that worship him without knowing that he's actually the one that they worship. You can see flyers of Mob's face or his figure all around town from time to time, and we see how this cult reacts when Mob does something important to the plot, but that's more or less unrelated to this person, so let's move on. You also have Bomi, who's Mob's longtime crush. Mob has a pretty hard crush on this girl, and it'll be interesting to see if it goes anywhere in season 2 of the anime, which I believe will complete the series overall. Will Bomi notice Mob and reciprocate his feelings, or will Mob be left to his own devices? It may be hard for Mob to carry on with any sort of love life, with the members of the evil organization Claw gunning for him. For now, I'll say that this guy that you're seeing on screen mostly, but also the other characters in the organization, have a big role to play in Season 1 and Season 2, and we'll definitely be talking about them more when we get to the What to Expect for Season 2 video. So to sum up the events of the first season, Mob and Reagan go around exorcising spirits and ghosts, while Mob goes about his daily life as a school student. Mob joins a personal fitness club at school, and he's also sort of a member of the occult club. At the same time, Ritsu is getting his hands pretty dirty by helping one of his disciplinary committee members frame another student for doing something pretty gross. Eventually, this leads to Ritsu feeling guilt and awakening his powers alongside a few low-power espers that we meet at the scientific research lab that Ritsu spends most of his time at. Mob comes against Teruki, and Teruki beats the hell out of Mob, but eventually Mob snaps out and almost destroys the entire school. After he puts it back together, him and Teruki eventually become friends, and things seem to be going well, so something has to go wrong. Ritsu is using his new psychic powers to beat up thugs and anyone that annoys him, and he even gets possessed by Dimple, amplifying his powers even more. A member of Claw sees Ritsu and tries to kidnap him, thinking that he's Mob. They think this because only one of the Kageyama brothers is supposed to have powers, so obviously they see Ritsu using his and they assume that he's the one. Mob arrives and has one of my favorite anime battles of all time with the guy, and eventually the guy gets away with Ritsu, and if I recall correctly, Mob comes home to some sort of illusion that his parents were killed or something. Anyway, Mob, Reagan, Teruki, and Dimple form a group to go and rescue Ritsu and the other low-powered espers that manage to get captured by this group. Mob's group fights a number of espers, and eventually they get Ritsu back and save the day, but not before this mysterious character appears, and the story seems to suggest that he'll be Mob's biggest threat since he's the son of the organization's boss, and it seemed like he's a fairly amazing powerful esper himself. What do you think about Mob Psycho 100? Is it interesting to you? Do you enjoy it? And are you excited for season 2 of the anime? I think 1 is great, and I really enjoy both of his series with Mob Psycho and One Punch. Studio Bones, the amazing studio behind My Hero Academia, is also the one that animates this show, so if you're a really big fan of My Hero Academia, make sure you check out Mob Psycho since the studio really gets into their crazy animation bag with this series, and it's definitely a sight to see. If you guys did enjoy this video or you're excited for the next season, please leave a like to let me know that you want to see more content about it. Hit that subscribe button to keep up to date with the channel, and hit the bell icon so you never miss one of my uploads. I've got some more Mob Psycho stuff cooking up, but I've also got some Heat My Hero videos dropping soon, so stay tuned and stick around. This is Pineapple. Peace.